Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. The initial batch of clone troopers numbered in the hundreds of thousands. By the rise of the New Order, millions of clones have been bred to serve the Republic. But soon after the Jedi Order fell, Kamino went down along with it, and the cloning program was discarded. Most likely it's because the clone troopers were just too expensive for a peacetime army. As we talked about in one of our last videos, at the end of the Clone Wars, some clones went AWOL, others continued fighting for the Empire that replaced the Republic. But who was the last clone? The final member of one of the most formidable fighting forces the galaxy had ever seen. Well, that's the story we'll be telling you guys today, and it's a really interesting story, especially when you figure out how he's able to survive so much longer than everyone else. CT-6116, otherwise known as Kix, was a clone medic assigned to the mighty 501st. Now, despite his medic background, Kix was actually a very aggressive soldier. He even had the phrase, "a good droid is a dead one," tattooed onto the side of his head in Arabic. Now, I personally respect people with tattoos on their head. It shows us that that individual most likely is a rash individual who oftentimes goes headfirst into situations without thinking. Now, personally, I would never get a tattoo on my head, but I appreciate the countless hours of laughter and humor pictures of people with tattoos on their heads have given me. Anyway, we first encounter Kix on the planet of Seleucami. Obi-Wan Kenobi and his clone troopers are in pursuit of General Grievous, who was just minding his own business, running around the galaxy cutting down Jedi. The Jedi believed that defeating the cyborg general was key to defeating the Separatist Alliance. While on the planet, a group of clone soldiers, including Kix, aid Obi-Wan Kenobi in fighting the Separatist general. Kix, along with Captain Rex, troopers Jesse and Hardcase, grab BARC speeders and begin searching the nearby area. They run into a pair of commando droids who had set up a sniper position and were immediately ambushed. Captain Rex is hit in the chest and thrown off a speeder. While the rest of the team chased down the two commando droids, Kix immediately went to check on Rex's status. Although the captain wasn't conscious, he was still alive, but in a critical condition. The blaster bolt had pierced his armor, but had missed his heart by 2 inches. Realizing that Rex was in terrible shape, the clones decided they needed to stabilize Rex and find him a place where he could rest. The captain was in no condition to ride on the back of a speeder bike. They would need to find another mode of transportation. Luckily, there was a nearby homestead that was willing to take an injured clone. Kix applies a back-to bandage to Rex's wound and stabilizes his condition. When Rex wakes up later, Kix informs him that he must stay and rest until he is able to travel back. Rex listens to Kix's recommendation and transfers command of the mission over to Jesse, and the rest of the clones continue the search for the escape pods, leaving Rex waiting behind for an extraction by the JAR. Kix's group eventually catches up with Obi-Wan Kenobi's unit, and together they attempt to capture General Grievous, who once again escapes. Later on, the 501st is deployed with Anakin Skywalker in charge during the Battle of Umbara. The Umbara campaign would be one of the toughest missions for the 501st during the war. The other tough mission would be the time that they invaded the Jedi Temple and murdered a bunch of children and librarians. The Umbarans were an isolated people who had developed very advanced weapons that were different to anything the clones had ever seen. The clone advance was immediately stalled by the Umbaran militia after the clones came under heavy fire from a hill overlooking their position. The JAR ended up calling in a Y-wing air support mission and succeeded in destroying the enemy forces on the high ground. Despite this first victory, soon things would spiral out of control as Anakin had to leave on other business and was replaced with Jedi General Krell. The Jedi was not only a dickhead, but also disrespectful to his men. He also was extremely stubborn and downright careless with how he deployed his soldiers. Immediately after their first battle, the 501st began a 12-hour forced march to their next objective. Even the hardy clones began to feel fatigue set in. Kix, who was constantly monitoring the men, suggested to Captain Rex that the battalion needed to rest before continuing. But of course, General Krell refused to do so. When the clones finally reached the Umbaran capital, General Krell decides to throw away Anakin's original sneak attack plans. The clones are pretty upset by this, but they engaged the enemy anyway and immediately found themselves overwhelmed by an Umbaran counterattack. As the 501st fell back, Kix tried his best to stabilize as many wounded clones as possible. Krell receives a new message from General Obi-Wan Kenobi shortly after. He tells the 501st to take the Umbaran airbase nearby. And once again, without any rest, the clones march on to their next battle. Many of the clones, including Kix, begin objecting to Krell's command in front of Captain Rex. The clones, despite their genetic conditioning, could only take so much. The 501st has marched straight into battle after battle without proper strategies and continue to suffer heavy casualties. During the aftermath of one firefight, Kix spots several Banshees eating the corpses of dead clones. Kix sort of loses it and begins firing at them. Morale continued sinking lower as the casualties started growing higher. Trust in their general was at an all-time low. In the midst of another battle, Kix became more and more desperate to save his fallen brothers, to the point where he was needlessly endangering himself. Captain Rex steps in and orders Kix to withdraw. He reasoned with the medic that if he got killed, no one else would be able to take care of all the other wounded. Tired and frustrated with seeing so many of his clone brothers dying around him, Kix tells Rex that he sounds just like the General. The 501st eventually captures the Umbaran airbase along with several advanced Umbaran fighters. For some reason, General Krell refuses to use these new ships to attack the Umbaran supply ships in orbit. This forces Fives, Jesse, and Hardcase to formulate their own plan to steal the Umbaran fighters and sneak into the Umbaran supply ships and destroy it themselves. This would directly be against Krell's orders, but many of the clones agreed it was the right way forward, including Kix. Only Jesse and Fives make it back from the successful mission, but they are immediately apprehended by Krell, who court-martials them and sentences them to execution. For some reason, Kix, the medic, is assigned to the firing squad, but when ordered to fire, he, along with the entire firing squad, purposely misses. Before Krell could release his fury on the clones, a radio transmission comes in warning the 501st that the Umbarans had stolen clone armor and were infiltrating the Republic's lines. The 501st deploys into a foggy forested area. Kix detects a group of soldiers wearing 212th Attack Battalion armor and quickly informs the unit of the imposters. A terrible firefight ensues and is abruptly stopped when the 501st and 212th both realize that they were firing at friendlies. Unfortunately, several clones lost their lives in this exchange. Kix once again must comfort the dying and try to save as many clones as possible. Upon learning that Krell had organized this whole friendly fire situation, the clones decide to go back to the base and confront him. Kix helps free Fives and Jesse from their cells and join a group of clones who attempt to arrest Krell. Eventually, Krell is stunned and put into a cell, but before he can be shipped off for a trial, one of Krell's most loyal clones can't help but shoot the Jedi. Kix continues to go on to serve the 501st wherever they go. After Umbara, the 501st visit the world of Kiros, home to a colony of Togrutas. Then Kix fought alongside Anakin once again during the Battle of Ringo Vinda on one of the planet's massive space stations. One clone, Tup, seems to go into a trance during the battle and shoots Jedi General Tiplar in the back of her head. After he is restrained, Kix does a quick assessment of Tup's, but is unable to find out what is wrong with the clone's brain. Kix does some further checks and brain scans on Tup's and concludes that the soldier might have just broken down from stress and combat fatigue. ARC Trooper Fives continues to investigate on Tup's situation and finds out that the clone had an organic chip in his head. This, of course, was the secret control chip that was placed in all the clones by Palpatine. In an attempt to keep this knowledge secret, Palpatine accuses Fives of attempting to murder him and forces the clone to go on the run. One night while Kix is at the Clone Bar 79's, Fives spots his friend and follows him into the bathroom. There, Fives explains everything about what he had learned about the control chips that were in all of their heads. Initially, Kix is not really sure whether to believe him or not, and even tries to convince Fives to turn himself in. But Kix finally agrees to help arrange a meeting between Fives, Captain Rex, and Anakin. As they part away, Kix wishes Fives good luck, not knowing that that would be the last time he would ever see his friend alive. Later on, Kix was involved in the Battle of Anaxes. The Separatists had captured a secret algorithm which could predict clone movement and were slowly advancing on GAR positions across the planet. In order to figure out what was happening, Mace Windu brings in the specialist group known as the Bad Batch. Commander Rex and Cody, along with Kix and Jesse, join the Bad Batch and try to figure out what is happening behind enemy lines. At first, the normal clones and the mutated clones don't get along with each other very well, but eventually they win each other's mutual respect and trust. After the Battle of Anaxes, Kix begins thinking about all the things Fives told him the night he was killed. Using his medic background, Kix was able to eventually find the control chip that was lodged in every clone's brain. He figured out that it was used to control their actions and made them obey a set of directives known as the contingency of the Grand Army of the Republic. His investigation, however, draws the attention of Count Dooku, who rushes to quickly prevent Kix from informing the Jedi. They capture the clone trooper and then attempt to interrogate him to figure out if he's told anyone else about his revelation. Kix is eventually inserted into a cryostasis pod and sent for further interrogation to Dooku's homeworld, Serena. But before the ship could reach its final destination, it was ambushed by a Republic fleet and heavily damaged. Given strict orders to not let Kix fall into Republic hands, the droid crew make a random hyperspace jump. The ship manages to make it to another system before it crashes into the desert planet known as Ponoma Terminal. There, Kix would lay in that stasis pod untouched for over 50 years. Unfortunately for Kaminoan clones, they were bred with an accelerated growth rate. This meant that they aged almost twice as fast as the regular human. Kix and most of the clones were around 12 years old when he was placed in stasis. By the time he finally emerges out of stasis 50 years later, All the clones are 62 years old, or over 124 years old in like real life terms, which means that none of them are alive anymore. Therefore, Kix is the last surviving clone soldier. So 50 years later, a Delphidian pirate and his crew stumbled across the Separatist crash. Pirates, along with other crews, had heard of a secret treasure left behind by Count Dooku and thought Kix's capsule must have been it. To their disappointment, all they find inside the capsule is a very confused but very much alive Kix. Kix begins yelling hysterically at the pirates that he needs to warn Anakin Skywalker about control chips and begins muttering like a crazy person. When Kix finally calms down, the pirates let him know where he is and what had happened to him. Kix is shocked to learn about the fall of the Republic, the rise and fall of the Empire, and the death of all of his fellow clone troopers. After finally coming to terms with what happened, Kix decides to join the pirate crew. Therefore, the last clone trooper in the galaxy becomes a pirate. Kix's story is a sad one. He had the rare job of being a clone medic, and during the Clone Wars, he tried his best to keep his brothers alive and healthy. He suffered tremendously during the war and constantly found himself holding his dead comrades in his arms. And fate then played the cruelest joke on him by keeping him alive longer than any other clone. So at the end of it all, despite all of his efforts to save as many people as possible, he finds himself alone. Well guys, that is the story of the last clone trooper to survive, Kix. I know it's a really depressing story, but let me know in the comment section below what you think. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. And as usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.